All right, well, welcome. Hi. This is a chat on um, being trauma informed. Let me change the view. There we go. Yeah, so I'm Mikki Beloy, and I'm primarily a shamanic healer and ancestral lineage healing practitioner living in the Hudson Valley of New York, which is past and present Lenape land. And I'm here with Eryka Peskin, whom I met, how many years ago did we say? 12, 14, 15, something years ago, more than that, at a conference. And we've been happy to stay in touch. And there's some overlap with our work. So we thought it would be great to take the conversations that we have like over brunch from time to time and open them up a bit to other people because I think a lot of what Eryka is offering is super relevant for holistic practitioners for sure, coaches and body workers and so on. But I also think that there's a really important intersection with her work and shamanic healing in particular, especially given that there are so many shamanic trainings now that may or may not include being skillful where being trauma informed is concerned, and because there's so much more plant medicine out in the world, a lot more access to those kinds of circles. But again, not everybody who is facilitating those, if they're facilitated at all, really has skill at being with people who are going through whatever they're going through in those moments. So it felt important, it felt relevant and resonant to have it just an informal kind of conversation with Eryka, to kind of dive into the details of that a little bit. Um, and Eryka, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Oh, it always feels so braggy to do my own bio, but since I'm a fan of people bragging about themselves, that's fine. So I am currently in New York City on the traditional lands of the Lenape Nation. I am from Brooklyn. I now live in Idaho, which is very strange conceptually for me, which is on the unceded and stolen lands of the Shoshone-Bannock nations. Um, let's see. So I am a social worker. I work primarily in hospice and home health as a social worker. I am also a coach. I work with people on mindset. I work with people on understanding money and how money works, identifying desires and dreams, and overcoming limiting beliefs and fears and inner critic crap and stuff. I'm a photographer. I do landscape photography, and I also do portraits under the Milky Way or among or on the ocean. And clothing is optional, so it's important to be trauma informed with that too. I am a writer. I'm a very dedicated auntie, and I also have a potty mouth. So if you are offended by cursing, I'm sorry in advance. Um, and yeah, like Mikki was saying, we've had many conversations either over brunch or over Zoom about various elements of practice, and we just thought, oh, we should just do this, invite other people into the conversation. So I'm so honored that you took time out of your Thursday night or afternoon or wherever, whatever time it is, wherever you might be, to be here for this conversation, because it's like a trauma informed world is a much kinder, and not to be all like hierarchical about it, but it's a much better world. So the more trauma informed we can all be, the better. So having you all join us in this conversation is really moving and very exciting. Thank you for being here.
Mm. Can you define for us before we move further? um, like what it is to be trauma informed. Like, can you
Sure.
define that?
Yeah. So, I mean, words like trauma and trauma informed are like thrown around so much these days. And I will, I want to say that, if you ask 20 different practitioners what their definition of trauma is, like probably everyone will have a different definition. But having said that, it'll probably have some commonalities. Like, so I'm going to first start off with defining trauma, and then I'll go into what trauma informed means, if that's okay with you. So basically, trauma, like an informal definition, is kind of like it's too much too fast. It's too much coming at us too quickly that we can't like get it. We can't handle it. Um, Another aspect of trauma, though, is too little over too long, in terms of too little attention, too neglect as in childhood or, stuff like that. And then hold on, let me find my like official PowerPoint with the definition so that I can just tell you. um, so a trauma is a response to an event that was a threat to our life, bodily integrity, or sanity, and our ability to handle that experience was overwhelmed. And if you want, I can put that in the chat if that would be helpful. Okay, I'll just put it in the chat. Why not? So here we go. And I say working definition because, definitions change. That's my definition right now. And so basically, what it just means is that something happens and it's just like we can't deal. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are things that happen to us that we just simply cannot handle. And it doesn't make us weak. It doesn't make us, any number of words. It's just what is. And so trauma informed then is about how we handle that. And so to be trauma informed means that you've had some training. You know how to, like, you can't just read the body keeps the score and then call yourself trauma informed. I'm sorry. That's a good start. um, it's not sufficient. So trauma informed means that you've gotten some training, you have a basic understanding of psychology. And I don't mean that you have to go to grad school or anything to, have an understanding of psychology, but you do need to have an understanding of how people work. And I've been finding that a lot of people think that um, because they have experienced something and come out the other side, that makes them qualified to teach other people or support other people in that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And also, just because like I went through bankruptcy, 15 whatever years ago, doesn't mean that my experience is everybody's experience and that I can automatically know what someone else is going through or has gone through, and I find that a lot of people seem to be missing that essential bit of info, which can actually be pretty damaging to people. Well, I guess we'll get more into that later. So basically, then to be trauma informed means that you have an understanding of trauma, you um, know how to deal with it when it comes up in your work with people, whether you're a coach or healer or whether you're like a human going through your day. You can be trauma informed, you can be a trauma informed like subway token clerk. You can be a trauma informed attorney, you can be a trauma informed mom, dad, whatever. Um, Trauma informed teachers would be great. Trauma informed doctors, let's like have more of those, please. Um, and so, yeah, does that make sense?
It does to me. Yes,
Does,
100%.
does that make sense to the rest of y'all? I mean, I can say more about that. Oh, it looks like there's a question from Ellen.
I'm a little confused
Sure.
about I just don't get the combination of trauma and informed.
So, okay. I don't get it. Sorry. My brain works differently sometimes.
I mean, the only thing I know about informed is to know something
Hmm.
or having been told something.
Hmm.
So trauma or traumatized person having been told something or have, you know what I mean? I'm just
Oh,
not,
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
So trauma informed is a term that is kind of like a term of art, where
okay.
it has basically it originated in medicine and in
Mhm,
counseling.
mhm.
So the idea is that certain clinicians, certain healthcare providers had gotten training to be informed about a certain
Okay,
population's needs. That's a
okay.
really good question though. Like,
Thank you.
sure, yeah, no, that's a great question. And then actually one more thing that I wanted to say about trauma informed is that just because someone might be trauma informed, it doesn't mean that they have um, the skill set to actually engage in trauma healing with someone. So those are two very different things. Like I might be trauma informed, but I shouldn't be a trauma healer. Actually, I can be a trauma healer because I am trained, but like someone else, they're very different things. The trauma healer actually engages with the trauma and works with people on healing techniques, whereas someone who's trauma informed knows what it might look like if someone is activated or triggered, which is a word that it was really problematic to use these days, um, and knows how to handle when someone is triggered, but doesn't actually engage in the healing process with them around it.
I'm so glad that you're making the distinction in these skill sets because I mean, maybe the landscape has changed a little bit in shaman schools and other kind of holistic trainings, yoga teacher training, and these things. But I feel like I learned the mechanism of trauma, right? Like a bit of how the particularly with like the energetic and what we might call the spiritual side,
Mhm.
what's happening kind of mechanically. And I also learned how to heal. Like here's a bunch of techniques you can use to address that. But I was not taught to be trauma informed. And I also kind of fell into the thing that you're talking about too, that you mentioned earlier of, well, I've been through things. I had PTSD that I recovered from and that I healed. And so therefore, I can do that for other people. And I think there's a sort of cultural messaging around that. And it's super important. I think as practitioners to have that discernment and say, here's where my skill set is strong, here's where it's lacking. Like here's this set of bricks that I was given, but I don't have the mortar, or something like that. And I think it's also important as clients that when we're going to work with a practitioner, we kind of understand like, oh, okay, they know how to engage with trauma. They have the skill set to do this, or they know how to hold a great space for somebody, but they don't necessarily have the training. Or like, it's just good to kind of have some kind of framework and language around these skills.
Yeah, totally agree. And I really appreciate your honesty, and also like I just want to say that I mean, I went through social work school, I'm licensed in 2 states, like I took tests and everything, like I have credentials, and that doesn't mean that I knew all of this about trauma, when I finished school, you know.
Mm.
So you don't want to assume that someone knows about trauma or is trauma informed unless you ask them. And
Mm.
you kind of want to ask what their training is in that particular field and or that particular area. And also like you don't have to have been traumatized to a I don't know, significant extent. What does that even mean? You don't have to have PTSD or CPTSD to want a practitioner who is trauma informed. Like a trauma informed practitioner has made a commitment to being ethical in terms of marketing, has made a commitment to being ethical in terms of getting consent and maintaining good boundaries. And they've also made a commitment to respecting your autonomy, which I guess is also about consent, and to basically just not being an asshole. And so, although I'm sure there are some trauma informed people out there who are assholes, you know, there it's not a gatekeeping thing that we can do. Um, so a trauma informed practitioner would really benefit you as a client because they're really good at holding space, like holding a space that is good for your growth, good for your healing, even if they're not engaging in the healing work with you around that a particular trauma, but just so that you can do the growthy stuff and feel like you're being held.
Mm. Growthy stuff. Love it. Um,
That's the official term.
yeah, yeah, no, I get it. Um, can we talk about examples of like trauma informed, not trauma informed?
Ooh, sure. Like in terms of marketing or in terms of like practice or all of the above?
Practice, maybe. We'll start with practice. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see.
I mean, I can think of things that were not, but I don't know if we want to go deep into like into that territory and those stories.
I mean, I'm willing if you are. Do you,
Mhm.
so, I mean, do you want to share something that maybe happened to you as a client that didn't feel so good or that other people told you or
Sure.
I'm
Well, I
putting you
mean,
on the spot?
I um
I mean, I have stories if you want.
yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned doctors, and I did have experiences with unsolicited advice about my reproductive possibilities, things that I did not ask for and that were not necessary as part of my healthcare checkups. Um,
Thanks.
yep,
Thanks for that.
yep. I had an ultrasound technician not introduce herself
Yeah,
and barely make eye contact. It was very kind of dehumanizing.
sure.
Um, and then, in the more holistic realms, I've seen a lot of people who don't list their pricing on their website.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that they have their reasons for doing that.
Yeah.
But from the point of view of somebody who's had some financial struggles, that puts a client potentially in an uncomfortable position.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
so those are a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head.
sure. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I wish you hadn't gone through those. Sending you empathy, right? Um, so let's see some examples that people have told me of non-trauma informed practice. Um, Someone was working with a hypnotist and they specifically told the hypnotist, do not bring something into this about car car accidents or cars or anything like that. And for whatever reason, the hypnotist used a car accident to take take my client friend and in their client into the hypnotic state, even though they specifically asked not to use that. And so from like the perspective of a trainer, I was like, why would they do that? Maybe they felt most comfortable with that and with that pathway. Maybe they felt that that would be the most healing for the client to use that, even though they specifically said don't use it. I mean, I'm trying to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure they're not evil. I just think that they were very ill advised to do that. And so what happened was my client was activated, did not have a good experience, and paid for a crappy experience. Like, that's the thing that gets me the most about this when stuff like this happens is like, we're paying or we're being paid to help someone heal or make their lives better or whatever. And yet, like, the client is having a shitty experience. That is so fucked up to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let's see. What's another experience?
I want to just, if I
Yeah,
could
sure.
highlight a thing that I think I noticed in what you just said, which is the practitioner maybe doing something that was in their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I, like, as a practitioner, I understand that.
Same.
Like we're creating a container. We have a kind of script or some bullet points that we tend to follow. There's a sort of protocol. Um, and at the same time, I think there's a need for improvisation and for flexibility and to really listen, because ultimately, like, I'm not there to perform for myself. Like, I'm not there doing a monologue. Like, it's really very much about the client. The whole reason I'm there is for them.
Yeah.
So, am I right in thinking that being trauma informed involves that degree of improvisation to help the client?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've never really thought of it that way, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's being a trauma-informed practitioner, and honestly being like a semi-decent practitioner who is not trauma-informed or whatever, like, means that you are not relying on your own perspective, and your own comfort zone of like, this person is having this issue. My expertise is over here. Maybe it's more over here what they need, but like, I'm going to shoehorn them in because that's what I'm most comfortable with, and they're paying me, and maybe I need the money, and like, there are all of these pieces to it too. And like, self-work is such an important part of being trauma informed, and being an ethical practitioner in general. Like, if you if you're having issues with money, if you're having issues with confidence, if you're not aware of your filters in terms of like biases or privileges and advantages and all that stuff, and systemic stuff that's happening in the world, then it's going to be it's going to come into the container with your client, and most likely not in a good way.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
all
so
it's
great.
complicated and it's big and it's messy and it's
Yeah.
nuanced. Um,
It is. I mean, like, it is really nuanced, and it can feel really messy, especially if like this is something that's really new to someone. Um, but honestly, like, how can I say this? I used to find, I mean, I love coaching. It's first of all, it's so much better than being a social worker. I can't even tell you. um, but there's a lot about coaching that feels very difficult. Um, and like, oh, how do I navigate this situation? How do I get the client to see this about themselves, and like all this other stuff? And honestly, like, when I really embarked on this trauma informed journey, which wasn't that long ago, like probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I really started diving in and then being like, oh yeah, I gotta share this information because there's some really messed up stuff happening. um and I found that a lot of stuff got much easier. Like, there's something about integrity and clear communication that is just easy, and also because, like, being a trauma informed practitioner is not about being perfect, because perfection isn't a thing that we can achieve, like, ever really.
are you sure?
Um,
Because I'm kind of like set on that basically.
Sorry. Actually, my nephew is 9, and he, like, whenever me and my sister are like, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect." He's like, "Don't say that. Perfect is not a thing." And he gets really aggravated about it, which, it's something that we're working on. But okay, I lost my train of thought for a second there.
That it's gonna be nuanced
Oh,
and
easier. Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
um yeah, like, once you know that you want to practice with integrity, that you want to practice with clarity, that you're co-creating with your clients, and that if something imperfect, in fact, if something bad happens and there's a rupture, that you can acknowledge it and you can try to repair it. There's there are these pieces that make it all so much easier. Like now, I mean, I've had confidence issues my whole life, like I'm a woman, I'm a fat woman in America. Like I've had confidence issues my whole life, and yet, and some of that definitely bled into my coaching in terms of like, ooh, I want people to like me and I want to do the best thing all the time. And so, as like really leaning into being a trauma-informed practitioner, like, yes, I still want to be the best that I possibly can and create the best container that I possibly can, but I have confidence in my skills like I never did before. And also, I have the confidence to know that if I fuck up, which I, might do, then I can at least try to repair. And the other person, the other person involved has the total right to not be willing to repair and to end the relationship. And that's okay. Like it's actually really confidence building in a very odd and unanticipated way. Like I didn't think that that would be a perk of being trauma informed.
Right. It allows everybody to have, or it doesn't allow because everyone already has agency, but it sort of crystallizes that sense of choice and like personhood.
Agency, yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. And I just really wanted to bring that out because so many people have expressed to me like, oh, Eryka, like it does seem like a lot of work and there's a lot of nuance here. Like, I mean, I don't want to have to go to social work school to understand trauma and be a trauma-informed practitioner. And like, I don't blame them. I would not want you to have to go to social work school either. I'm sorry to be so negative about social work school. It's, it's for some people, it's a wonderful journey. um, I just prefer coaching and photography. What can I say?
Huh. So, man, there's so much good stuff in here. I want to just, if we can, just leave a moment. If there's any questions from the folks who are here in the Zoom room, or if you want to put them in the chat, that's also welcome. Um,
Yeah, or any comments or observations or anything,
yeah,
please feel
yeah,
free.
reflections here. Did I hear?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Rita, and I have a question. My question is, if a person goes through trauma and they're all the time as a child been through father yelling and drinking and violence kind of stuff in the house when I was little. Does the depression continue to stay on right now? Is that part of the trauma?
Mm. Mikki, do you want me to take that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you looked like you had feelings. um, yeah. So Rita, first of all, I just want to like give you some empathy and send that through the airwaves. Um, that's a really challenging way to grow up. I'm so sorry, and I wish you hadn't had to experience that. Um, Depression can absolutely be a trauma response, and there are a lot of reasons why that could be, like our nervous systems, our neurotransmitters, and, things felt in the body. And, um, I don't know you, and if we were in like a coachy relationship or whatever, I would probably do this much more skillfully and gently. I hope you have support, and I
I,
encourage you to like talk to a therapist or a psychologist about this to get some support around this because you
I
shouldn't
do.
have to suffer. Okay, that's good. I'm glad.
I see a therapist and I see a psychiatrist too.
Great.
So I just want to know if even though it happened years ago,
Mm,
and I'm right now 72,
yeah.
does the depression continue on from that source?
Okay, so that is actually a really beautifully complex question.
Mm,
And if it's okay with you all, I can talk a little bit about the brain and the nervous system and how and why you are still feeling this even though you're in your early 70s.
yeah.
Um, okay, so basically there are there are three parts of our brain that are relevant to stress responses. Like there are
Mm,
lots of different parts of our brains that do a lot of different things, but the relevant parts are our prefrontal cortex, which is our like
mhm.
thinky, reasonable brain, problem-solving brain.
Mm,
It's where when something happens, you can figure out what to do. Then there's the limbic and the reptilian parts of our brain. And those parts of our brain actually form when we're very young. The reptilian actually forms in utero. And what happens is that those parts of our brain have no sense of time or place.
mm,
Like those parts of your brain have no idea that you are 72 years old. They think that when they are activated in a stress response or a depression
mhm,
response, they think
mhm,
that this is happening right now. The
mhm,
horrible, the yelling, all of the stuff is happening right now. And so your prefrontal cortex kind of goes offline when you're in a stress response. And by stress response, I mean like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And
mhm.
so, yeah, your prefrontal cortex goes offline, and then you go into your limbic or reptilian brain. And so you have no idea what's that like these things happened a long time ago. For those parts of your brain, they are happening right here and right now.
Ow. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's really bad design.
Yeah, it is.
It is, right? Ugh, it's so annoying. And so one of the things that I wanted to share conceptually, a concept that I wanted to share with you all was something called the window of tolerance. Um, and this is relevant, I promise. So the window of tolerance is a way to understand our emotional capacity and how we understand stress or how we handle stress. Um,
Mm,
so it's a term that was coined by Daniel Siegel. He's a psychiatrist and a professor at UCLA School of Medicine. And basically, it's our optimal emotional zone for us to function and ideally thrive in everyday life. And so each of us has a window of tolerance where we can use the information that we get from the world to regulate our emotions or not. um, on either side of our window are like a dysregulation space where we start to get like something's weird, something's off, and then beyond those dysregulation spaces are either hyper arousal or hypo arousal.
oh. Mhm,
Yeah, so hyper arousal is like high energy, anger, panic, anxiety, hypervigilance or fight or flight, a heightened startle response. Those are just a few of them. Hypoarousal is like where we shut down or get numb or depressed, where we dissociate, withdraw, freeze, you know.
mhm,
Um, so we go outside of our window of tolerance when something happens, like there's a stimulus and it overwhelms our capacity to handle it, which, if you are thinking back to the beginning of our talk, it's like the definition of trauma, right? So when we are outside of our window of tolerance, we lose access to our prefrontal cortex. That's the thinky part of the brain. We become dysregulated and we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that means that our limbic and reptilian brains are in control And remember, those parts of our brain are very immature. And I don't mean that in a judgy way. They're young. They stop developing and they don't get more mature as we get older. And so we might choose some not great strategies to get out of that situation, like doing and saying things we might regret, and so on. So no two people have the same window of tolerance. Like each of us has a unique window, and its size depends on a bunch of things. My window of tolerance is different from Mikki's, and it's different from Lisa's and Ellen's and Rita's and and I'm sorry, Turtle. Oh, yeah, Turtle. Okay, so all of us have a different size of window of tolerance, and our window can get bigger or smaller throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout our lives. It's dynamic. It doesn't just stay in one, like here's my window, that's it. Let me try and get through. Um, and here are some of the things that affect our window of tolerance. So first of all, trauma. A history of trauma impacts our nervous system, which impacts our window of tolerance, which makes it smaller, which means that we are much more likely to go into a dysregulated place. Physical needs also affect our window of tolerance. I don't know about you, but like I get hangry. I also get tangry, like thangry and tangry, tired and thirsty, angry, so like that's the window of tolerance shrinking as well, and shrieking, shrinking and shrieking. Physical pain and health issues also affect our window of tolerance. If you have chronic pain or chronic health issues, ooh, it takes a toll. Oppressive societal systems like white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, toxic religion, all forms of systemic oppression affect our window of tolerance. Neurodivergence affects window of tolerance, like some, and depression is a form of neurodivergence. It doesn't have to be a trauma response. It could also be something that you experience because of your body chemistry and your brain. So, but like neurodivergence can very much affect our window of tolerance, as can having ADHD or being autistic, or any kind of neurodivergence, mental health challenges in general, and so forth. So a bunch of things can lead to making our window smaller, which can lead to some challenges. And so the more you can work on widening your window of tolerance, the less likely you are to get dysregulated, and the less likely you are to go into stress response. And so how this all ties into what you asked, Rita, is, like if you're, I don't know the specifics of your situation and how the depression manifests itself. Something you might want to discuss with your therapist and or your psychiatrist, if they're not aware of your trauma history already, is that, what can you do to work on your window of tolerance so that you are supported, like supported in terms of your inner self, and as well your inner work. Okay, let me start that over.
I know.
Supporting yourself, and also getting support externally too, so that you're less likely to be dysregulated, which might send you into a depression, because your limbic and reptilian brains part of your brain are being activated. So that was a lot.
It all works into trauma, though.
It could, yeah, it could very well could. There could also just be depression. Depression can exist outside of a trauma history as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like There's some new research that's saying that like basically all trauma stems from, I mean, all mental health issues like trauma, anxiety, and ADHD, et cetera, all stem from trauma. You know, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a non-nuanced thing to say. Like some people are just kind of prone, which is
Mhm.
just how things are. There's variability in the human in the human experience and in the human body. Um, if you're feeling like your depression stems from trauma, I hope that you're working on that with your therapist and getting support with that because you deserve that.
Oh, yes, I'm working very hard with her.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad that you're supported.
Hmm.
And I want to say too, I think just in my own experience that resolving trauma, like doing different kinds of therapies, EMDR, brain spotting, CBT, also shamanic work, ancestral lineage healing, like these things are ways to help resolve the trauma. And in addition to that being good on its own and for its own sake, it also does widen the window of tolerance.
Absolutely.
Like it's one of the ways that we create more regulation in our systems. We're less likely to be activated. Um,
Hmm.
so, and then I think also just to bring this back around to being a trauma informed practitioner, we want to be working with people who are grounded, who are regulated, who are within their window of tolerance.
Hmm.
Because that's when they're going to be able to really metabolize best, right? Like they're not in fight or flight, they're not trying to run away, they're not shutting down. Like they're really able to stay with the experience, um,
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
right.
That's not always possible in
Right.
a session. That's not always, and in fact, it's not always how people come to work with a practitioner. I mean, most people, I would say, well, I guess I can't really say this. A lot of people um, want to work with a practitioner when they are not in the best space and they want to make something even better. And so if I can share one more like bit of information with you all. um, so I'd love to share a conceptualization of trauma that I've found really helpful and what happens in the psyche when someone experiences a traumatic event that is traumatic. You know, like, I mean, each of us can experience an event that, you know, one of us finds traumatic and the other one doesn't. But let's say that, you know, this event is found traumatic, is experienced as traumatic by the person. So this is based on the work of Professor Franz Rupert. He's a professor of psychology and trauma in Munich. And I really like his work around this. He's said some questionable things about the pandemic and other things that I have found somewhat challenging. So, you know, this is really helpful. You know, do use that information as you will. So according to Rupert, the psyche splits into three parts when there's a traumatic event. There's a fragmentation in the psyche as the result of the traumatic event. And so it splits into the trauma part, the survival part, and the healthy part. So the trauma part is where the feelings and the experience and the memories and the body memories of the trauma are stored. And this is mostly unconscious unless they're activated or triggered in some way. And triggered in this case is like triggering the trauma experience. And that is the proper use of triggered, by the way. You know, I don't like to be too gatekeepy about like clinical terms and stuff like that, or, you know, clinical expertise, but like that really bothers me. But anyway, moving on. The survival part is the part that emerges to ensure the survival during the time of the traumatic experience. And its continual function after that traumatic experience is to keep the pain, the anguish, the fear of that traumatic experience in the unconscious. So the survival part creates defense mechanisms that have been developed to keep us in a sense of safety and help us survive. But the strategies that the survival part uses are not always great and may ultimately be problematic. The other thing is that the survival part is inflexible and it is defensive. It is likely to get super defensive when challenged because it's like, why are you challenging me? This is about keeping, the painful feelings down, like back off, It is not receptive to feedback. And this might have a lot of relevance in the shamanic and plant healing communities. When the survival part is activated, the person is out of contact with their body. The felt experience is not available as information that can be used, and it can even be overridden by like suggestions from others. And the survival part is likely to become even more, what's the word? Like aggressive if it's challenged. And then the healthy part is the part of the person's psyche that is undamaged by the trauma and holds the person's internal resources for growth, for joy and love and freedom and passion and self-reflection and clarity, and can feel a complex range of feelings like anger and fear, but don't ignite or activate the survival part or the trauma part. So there are times when people, first of all, any questions about any of that? Okay. So a person might come to us. A person generally, in my experience, comes to a practitioner because their survival part strategies are not working for them. And so then the practitioner kind of has to figure out how to work with that survival part without activating the survival part in session or in the work together. And that can be really challenging. I mean, like before I knew this model, like I did a whole bunch of stupid shit that was working with the survival part. And the thing is that the survival part is not changeable. The whole goal around for a practitioner is to get the person into the healthy part, widen their window of tolerance so they're less likely to be in the survival part, and to, help that survival part get a little smaller or at least less powerful. And so, like, there are definitely ways to redirect the person into the healthy part. And, there will be times in sessions when people, get activated, and it's up to the practitioner to be able to like detect that, like, oh, this person is like kind of shifting. They're not doing eye contact with me. They're moving around a lot, or they're like clenching, or like they just snapped at me, you know, or they seem to have really shut down. So in that situation, the practitioner would need to use their trauma-informed skills to bring that person out of that activated survival part state and into the healthy part. Ooh, sorry, I'm about to cough. And into the healthy part so that they can be in a growth space. Okay, I'm gonna drink some liquid now.
Yeah, thank you.
I know I
Thanks,
just threw a
Jonathan.
lot at you.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, I think of, folks are here in part because of some degree of interest in shamanic work and the things that I've offered. And so, um, I just think in particular of like the plant medicine ceremonies and circles. And in fact, I just got an e-letter today from a practitioner who is trauma informed and holds those circles, talking about how important it is to not be engaging in those practices solo, um, and to be sure that the person that you're sitting with, like your shaman, your facilitator, um, has some skill at holding that space, because you can go to some pretty intense, shadowy, activating places, and it's a bad idea to be doing that on your own, without support, without resourcing, without somebody checking on you. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to like drop that in for folks who are here or who might watch this later. Um, there are so many circles right now with people who are really not qualified to be doing that work. Um, and blessings for good intentions, but also like we gotta set the bar pretty high, to be able to sit with people who are in grief or are resolving years of childhood stuff, or are facing their own mortality or whatever it might be. Like, that needs to be handled with skill and with kindness, and with recognition of what's going on, so that they can help you navigate. And you shouldn't have to go through that by yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add other than like, yes. um, although I was thinking when you were saying about, you shouldn't do it alone, and you shouldn't, but like doing it alone is better than doing it with like a horrible practitioner who is
Absolutely.
holding space, but actually causing damage rather than holding good space. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I've heard stories.
Yeah, you don't have to go far to hear some terrible stories of the ways that people are manipulated, when they're vulnerable.
Yeah. And it can really cause lasting damage. I mean, that's why I have a course that trains practitioners on being trauma informed, and I call it Do No Harm.
Ah,
um,
yeah.
and yeah, and it's, yeah, blessings. I'm sure people are not, like venal assholes like,
Mhm.
some politicians I can name. Um, but like, it's not enough to have good intentions when you're working with people, when you have your hands on people's bodies, or like in their psyches, or in their trauma and their grief or whatever. Like, you you really have a responsibility, and I don't think that's really talked about sufficiently in these like transformational, heart-centered, whatever you want to call it, world that we're in. Like,
Agreed.
I mean, like, I don't agree that I don't think that everything should be regulated, and that there should be gatekeeping, which will just involve more fees and make things less accessible to people, who might be of lower income and have fewer resources. And also, I do think that, there's a responsibility to honor the power that we have as someone who is working with someone.
Mhm.
And like, like, you have to you have to have ethics if you're going to be working with people's money. That's questionable, but at least you have to, sign stuff and take some courses.
Yes.
You don't have to do that to be a practitioner.
Right. That's exactly. I mean, I'm not bound by the Hippocratic Oath. I'm not bound by HIPAA, but I try to behave as though I was.
Same.
And so I would expect that kind of integrity of the practitioners that I go to as a client as well.
Yeah.
And I think everybody should. I think
I
we have
agree. Yeah.
a
Oh, I'm sorry.
question, Betsy. If you had something you'd like to share, either in the chat or live.
Hi there. No, I'm here. Sorry, I apologize for being off camera, but we're about to wrap, so I don't know if it's too big of a question or not. First of all, thank you so much for doing this, and um, I'm delighted to be here. My question actually is kind of twofold, which is, as someone who has been on the receiving end of someone who was not trauma informed, who was supposedly a healer, and also as the parent of a trans son who has many, many stories of this, which just keep going on. The one part A of that question is, do you have any suggestions of how, if you're on the receiving end, how to deal with this? For me, in the moment, I was too much in shock. It took me a while to realize what had happened. And afterwards, I was like, holy cow. And then, as an intelligent person who's been an educator all my life, I truly believed that this person believed that she had my best interest at heart, that she was trying to help me heal, and honestly didn't realize what she had said to me. And I really struggled with, do I reach out to her, like as another adult woman who's in a kind of caregiving profession, do I reach out to her and share this with her so she'll know? And yet I felt so paralyzed that I was like, I just don't even want to go there. I never said anything to her and I never went back to her. So that's the one side of it, is like, are there constructive ways to share feedback with that person as an adult human? And then on the flip side, as someone who works in a nonprofit that very often, I've also been a teacher all my life, and I've worked with LGBTQ young people a lot. But in the job that I'm in now, I'm not in the healing profession. However, I do community engagement, and a lot of the people who come to us come. Oh, we have to go. Sorry, I just saw that note.
You don't have to go. It's okay.
Oh,
Just letting
okay.
people can if they need to.
All right. A lot of people who come to us come because they're hurting and seeking. And, I would love to know strategies for just checking in, and making sure I can, of course, learn myself and educate myself and be as trauma informed as I can. But are there also like small things that I can do just as a human to just check in, make sure that the people that I'm dealing with are okay, which is kind of the flip side of what I wish this person had done with me.
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
won't take the time to share the story, but Mikki has heard it. So, yeah.
Oh, you're welcome to share with me offline if you want. You can
Thanks.
email me.
You took my question at 2 minutes before 8, so I apologize.
No, you're fine. No, I'm happy to stay on, Mikki. I don't know what
Me
your
too.
schedule is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And if people, please feel free to manage your schedules and like do what you need to do. It's all fine. So, your first question about, is there a like gentle or, like what was the word that you used?
Well, I don't know. It would be like, I think what I was grappling with was, is there a purpose? Like, there was a part of me that was sort of like the reactive part of me that wanted to just let her know.
Sure.
And then there was another part of me that was like, maybe she should know. Like, aside from my personal reaction as a professional,
Sure.
she should probably know that what came out of her mouth was like incredibly,
Yeah.
like, I just kind of like time stopped for me in the moment. I hate to use the word triggering, but it was.
It's okay. That sounds
Yeah.
legitimately triggering.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Here are my thoughts on that. And I'm going to answer, the first part of my answer is combining both like practitioner and also client.
Mhm.
The practitioner should, and I don't usually like to use the word should, but I will use it here. The practitioner should be creating a container where feedback is welcome
Mm.
and encouraged, and where if the practitioner does something, then that the client feels like they should say something.
Right.
And a lot of practitioners don't know how to do that. A lot of practitioners don't know to do that. Honestly, I felt like the pinnacle of my coaching career happened when my client called me out for something. I was like, yes, I have created the most fucking awesome container. Yes. And I'm so excited to write a newsletter about it.
Yeah.
And, the fact that your practitioner did not do that
Mhm.
is not on you
Right.
and is problematic. And so I don't think that you have to be gentle when you are giving, like, you don't have to tone police yourself
Mhm.
when you're like, that really fucked me up.
Hmm.
Like, it is then on the practitioner to take care of themselves so that they can get that feedback and not put it on you to take care of them. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you are
Thank
paying this
you.
person.
Yeah, that's really, that's so spot on because I tend to, that's also me. Like I tend to do that. Like, I
Sure.
want to be a people pleaser. I want to say things gently and blah, blah, blah. And like
Totally.
that,
I mean,
yeah, it
I mean,
takes courage to speak up that way.
absolutely, it does.
Yeah,
It's not an
yeah,
easy thing to do. And honestly, if you don't have the capacity in the moment because you are outside of your window of tolerance because of something that just happened, you don't
right,
have, like, don't,
right.
you
Oh, I
know.
didn't.
Well, so, I feel like a really good example of like the window of tolerance and not being able to do something in the moment is you remember when Comey, former head of FBI, was
Mhm,
in Donald Trump's office and Donald Trump was telling him to do, one of like 500 million things that was illegal. I can't remember which particular thing,
mhm.
because, anyway, I'm so glad this is going on YouTube, so, Um, and Comey was, I mean, Comey, the head of the FBI, arguably one of the most powerful people in the world, tall, white male, privileged in so many ways, was like, I didn't know what to say or do,
Mm.
So like, if Comey can have that reaction,
Yeah.
so can we all, and I'm not like being glib, or I'm not kidding. Like when stuff like this happens, it is extremely difficult to like marshal our prefrontal cortex is offline. It's not doable.
Mhm.
Like, it is
Right.
simply not doable. And so, if at some point you have the capacity to be like, hey, when you said that thing, that was actually quite damaging, you know?
It's very interesting because it happened years ago and it still sits with me and, she's a
Sure.
local practitioner and I see her online and every time I'm just like, "Hmm, okay." And I think she was just there was no ill intent there.
It doesn't
I will
matter.
say
Impact
that.
over intention.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. And so I think that it's really important that as practitioners and as clients, that as practitioners, we create the space and we take care of ourselves so that we can get feedback, which might not always be great.
Mhm.
And as clients, that we feel empowered and like our experience is valid, like, hey, this was not.
Right.
And you don't have to be like, you're a terrible person, you shouldn't do this anymore, like, you don't have to do that, although, whatever. But you can just express from your own experience, like, this was really hard for me and that's why I disappeared.
Yeah, that's good. It doesn't have to be personalized is what you're saying.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I'm also not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna tone police you. Like, you are
Mhm.
the client, It's kind of like if your clients at your nonprofit were just kind of like, you did this thing that was really fucked up,
Mhm.
you, I'm guessing, would want to know so that you could prepare,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
you know? And so I encourage you to speak up if you can. And if you can't, then it's okay, but you can also send her the link to my course.
Okay. Thank you very much. I
Sure.
appreciate your time answering those questions.
Well, I didn't answer the second one. The second one, in terms of what you can do to, work with your clients is to just really create a space of consent.
Mhm.
And because so much of trauma is too much, too fast, and without permission.
Mhm.
The more consent and agency you can provide for them, the better it will be. And also just kind of creating a space that is, and an environment that, doesn't send people out of their window. I mean, I know that you can't promise that, like no one can promise that.
Right.
Like, it's a thing now that we're not supposed to say, like, I'm creating a safe space, because we can't promise safety. Okay, sure, fine. But you can, as much as possible, create an environment of care and of
Mhm.
support, and do things to help them widen their window.
Mm.
Try
And
not.
listening. Yeah.
Yeah, listening, like active listening. There's actually trauma-informed listening, which I teach in my
Hmm.
course, and which is active listening, but like on steroids. And just like being really conscious of inclusivity, diversity, the impacts of systemic and collective trauma, which I'm sure your clients are experiencing.
Mhm.
And yeah, just creating a really nurturing space, because they probably don't, because all of them probably don't have that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, are there any other questions? I know we're a little over time, but I mean, I could talk about this all day. Okay.
In terms of the systemic pieces that you're naming, like I think that's also super super important. Just as maybe a closing thought from my side, it's probably fair to say that like everybody you meet in mainstream culture has got some kind of either little t or big T trauma going on. Like I think if we start with that as a baseline, and include ourselves in that, even if we don't think we have stuff, we have stuff. Like I think just living in this culture is sort of inherently difficult and harmful.
Well, not to mention that we are, 4 years into a global pandemic.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a list as long as our arm of things that are really hard,
Yeah.
and harder depending on where you were born, and all of the ways that you might be marginalized. Um, so I think we maybe start with that as a baseline. We can immediately show up a little kinder in whatever we're doing, and if I may, also to Betsy's question, um, it can be a healing act to advocate for yourself even after the fact. So just to say, if you don't have the capacity in the moment, there might be something, to write a letter, to do something afterwards, regardless of the outcome with the practitioner or whoever it is, that can be a step that you can take for yourself to kind of resolve what didn't happen then. Yeah, there's so
Thank you.
much that we could say about all of
That makes a lot of sense to me. Not to interrupt you, Mikki, but thank you. That does make sense, and I can see how it could be a very healing thing to do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and as a practitioner too, it might be uncomfortable to get the feedback, but I would rather have known. Like if I had inadvertently stepped in it with somebody, I would like to know so I don't do it again with somebody else.
Mhm.
Like I really want to be good at this,
Mhm.
so I would rather have that information, rather than have somebody just not ever come back again, and I don't know why. We should have a part two, Eryka, because I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of these things.
Well, part 2 is my course. I would love to do that, Mikki. That would be awesome. And I also invite any of you to reach out to me. My email is eryka@eryka.com, and that's ERYKA at ERYKA.com. I bought it in 2000, so that's why I have that. And I'm happy to also, give you more information about all things trauma informed related. Like I mentioned, I do have a course starting in June to help practitioners be trauma informed. It's 6 months long, and it's basically like grad school without having to go to grad school and with more curse words. So, and yeah, it's really an honor to do this work, and I'm so grateful for all of you being here. And thank you so much, Mikki, for creating this space and this opportunity.
That's my pleasure. Yeah,
Yeah.
always good. And thank you for what you're doing. We need more practitioners and just people who, like you said, who have this skill set and this knowledge base, and for clients, for those of us who go get services, we need to have some vocabulary around why things didn't feel right and what to do about it. So thank you, Eryka.
It's my pleasure. Maybe that could be our part 2. How to tell your practitioner that they really fucked up.
Right. Understanding that they are also traumatized, probably, right? Like,
yeah.
And it was interesting to me that because I'm not in any of those professions where I would have these formal circumstances, but while you were speaking, I was going through my head just how I show up with my friends, with my family. Those good ideas of what to do and what not to do are good too. I guess I would call myself a civilian.
A civilian. Yeah.
Yeah.
I call people who are not in the coaching or healing worlds or entrepreneurial world like normal people. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There have been times with my family when I've just been like, okay, my sister's in her survival part.
Yeah, that's very
How can I
helpful.
redirect her? And it's been very helpful.
It is helpful.
So
Thank
that
you.
my survival part doesn't interact with her survival part, and then we don't talk for a month, so yeah, thank you for saying that. So many implications for life and the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aw.
I have to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, both of you, all of you. Very good evening.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you for being here. Bye.
Bye. Take care. Thank you. Good seeing you again, Mikki.
You too.